Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give it just a second to let folks log in. Thank you for joining us today. Our presentation this morning is going to cover the topic of NSPIRE and kind of how that new process works. Manuel Pena is with us this morning. He's going to be our presenter, and he is going to share lots of good information with us about the processes and kind of what they've learned through this first round of inspections that they've done. My name is Kara Poli, and I am a compliance monitor, and I am going to be monitoring the questions box and putting some resources in the chat box today. So you won't see me presenting. That'll be a little bit of a shift. So any questions that you have, please put those in the chat box. If you registered before 8 a.m. today, you should have gotten an email from me with your handouts. There would have been a colored handout and a black and white handout. Those are also available through your go-to platform under resources. If you would like to have closed captioning on, you can turn that on through GoToMeeting. There's a little square box like you see on TVs that has the CC in it, and that'll turn on closed captioning for you. If you are needing anything else, please feel free to send me a message or put it in the questions box, and I will do what I can to help. If you are not hearing me, you might need to leave the presentation and come back or check the volume on your computer. I am seeing just one person said they cannot hear me. But other than that, okay, a couple of people cannot hear. Can anyone actually hear me? If you can hear me, put it in the questions box. Okay, so lots of folks can hear me. A couple of folks cannot. If you cannot hear me, please put that, you might try to leave and come back or restart the GoToMeeting. I know it had an update today as well. So without further delay, I'm going to let Manuel take it away. He is sharing his screen this morning and going to be presenting the national standards for the physical inspection of real estate. Manuel, have at it.
Thank you, Kara. So welcome, good morning, and Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you enjoyed today's NSPIRE training. Today we're talking about NSPIRE. It's the first office hours of 2025, and I hope you all learned something today. So my name is Manuel Pena, Manager of Physical Inspections here with TDHCA. And let's go ahead and get started. As Kara said, if you have questions, please type in the chat, raise your hand, let Kara know. We'll answer any questions you all want. This training is for you all, so please grab some coffee, get comfortable, and we hope you enjoyed today's training. And again, thank you all for joining us. So let us go ahead and jump right in. So here on this screen, you'll see our contact information. This is our mailing address, our physical address, and our website address. This is a new website TDHCA had just created probably within the last year and a half. There's a lot of great information there. Kara's going to be sharing a lot of our links to some of the forms that we're talking about today, some of the stuff. That's our main division telephone number and our toll-free number. So if you get a chance, visit our website, look under compliance, and we have a lot of great information on our website for you all. So announcements, today's training is going to run from 9 till about 10:30. I'll be presenting, and then from about 10:30 to 11:30, we'll be open to take care of any questions that you have. We'll be a mid-morning break in between this webinar and the forum, and we'll be available to answer any questions. I believe Amy and her team, Kara, will be available to answer any questions you have in regards to monitoring, and I'll be available to answer any questions for NSPIRE. So Kara's going to talk a little bit about the housekeeping and certificates.
So we are not going to issue certificates for this. This is a very informal training, and we have two different pieces that go with this. So there's going to be the webinar portion that Manuel's going to present this morning, and then there's going to be an open forum office hours after that. So because of that, we don't have any way to discern who came to what. So certificates are not issued, but you will get an email that says thank you for coming, and that should suffice if your company that you work for needs to see proof that you attended. Additionally, I would encourage you to silence your phones and maybe put an email out of office or close your email for this brief time. It is a short window of time, but it is a resource that we're trying to offer to you guys, and so we really want you to get the most out of that, and being fully present is a good way to do that. Any questions that you have, you can put those in the questions box. I think you can see the chat box, but I'm not sure that you can send a chat out. So I'm not sure that's going to be the best way, but I will be putting resources in the chat that are presented in the presentation as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Kara. So like I said, it's very informal training. This training is for you all. Please let Kara know in the chat if I'm talking too fast, talking too slow, if you can hear me or not. So just kind of communicate with Kara. So let's go ahead and jump right in. This is our department resources. Those are our websites as well. We have compliance, physical inspections. We have construction inspections and accessibility. We're not going to talk too much about construction inspections or disaster or casualty loss, but if you have any questions about that, please feel free to email me or contact me, and we can definitely get you in the right direction. We have some training presentations, and our all-inclusive contact list is also on our website. So check out our website. We encourage everyone to check out our website, check out all the great resources that we have for you all. And anybody on the contact list, you can contact any inspector or any monitor can help you with your questions. We can guide you in the right direction. We're all here together to work for the residents of the state of Texas. We're working together. We all partner together. So we're here for you all. If you have questions, we're an available resource, and we have a lot of great information for you all as well. So please check out our website. Any of those websites or those links can take you to that, or you can contact anybody as well. So let's go ahead and begin. Before we begin, just a quick disclaimer that just want to let you all know, of course, you all know that HUD has stated that they will publish through Federal Register updates to the standards at least once every 3 years. So we're not offering legal guidance. So some of the things that we talk about today may change in the future. Just be mindful that HUD will send out these notices through Federal Register. I think HUD just sent one out in regards to non-scoring deficiencies. And we'll talk a little bit about those non-scoring deficiencies here in a moment. We'll talk about some scoring deficiencies. We got a lot of great information for you to share today, but like I said, we're not providing legal guidance. And just a quick disclaimer before we get into the training. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So what is NSPIRE? So NSPIRE is a new inspection protocol that replaces the old standard, the 20-year standard that was in place, which was UPCS inspection standard, the Uniform Physical Condition Standard. NSPIRE has also changed the mantra. UPCS was decent, safe, and sanitary. Now they changed the mantra to functionally adequate, operable, and free of health and safety hazards. There's 63 NSPIRE standards, and with each one of those standards, there's several deficiencies from, I think, a minimum of 3 deficiencies all the way up to 17 deficiencies inside each one of those standards. And I'll show you a slide about what those standards are here in a minute. And we encourage everyone to be familiar with the standards. I have found as we're conducting these inspections, if you're ready for a UPCS inspection, you're going to do fine during NSPIRE. There's quite a bit of a changes. NSPIRE has kind of revamped their scoring algorithm. What NSPIRE does is it places a greater category of deficiencies in the residence unit. So wherever the residents spend the most of the time, that's where it's going to have your higher a chance of getting lower scores if you have a lot of health and safety deficiencies in the resident unit. So the scoring algorithm has been revamped. So they place a higher impact on those scores if you have a lot of health and safety deficiencies in your resident unit. So it's really important to ensure that your units are free of severe and life-threatening deficiencies. So NSPIRE, TDHCA adopted NSPIRE effective January 1, 2024. So all inspections, if you're scheduled for an inspection, a TDHCA inspection, it's going to be conducted using NSPIRE. This is all across the board. This is not just for new allocation of developments or place in service dates. This is for all inspections that TDHCA does. So if you get an inspection scheduled, it's going to be conducted utilizing NSPIRE. So here's the 63 standards. You'll see, as I said, there's several deficiencies under each of those items. Some of the new items that we have there are going to be the doors. If you look at 10, 11, and 12, NSPIRE breaks down the doors to 3 different categories: entry doors, fire labeled doors, and general doors. There's also some new deficiencies on here that are under handrails and smoke alarms as well. There's a lot of changes with smoke detectors and smoke alarms as well. So these are the NSPIRE standards, and like I said, underneath each of those, there's a lot of category of deficiencies. So we advise you all to pay attention to those, look at those, study those, and become familiar with those. There's a lot of different types of deficiencies. And like I said, if you're ready for a UPCS inspection, I think you're going to do fine conducting an NSPIRE inspection. TDHCA retains a scoring scale of 0 to 100. So you really want to make sure that your development score is as high as possible. For TDHCA, if your development scores 70 or below, we deem that in poor physical condition. So we may place you on an accelerated inspection schedule. That means that we're going to come out and conduct an inspection within the next year. So whenever a development scores below 70, we place you on our accelerated inspection schedule. So it's a little bit different from HUD, and we'll talk about the differences between HUD NSPIRE inspections and TDHCA NSPIRE inspections here in a moment. But we want to let you know that if your development scores 50 or less on several occasions, the responsible party can be referred through enforcement and may possibly be debarred. So you want to make sure that your scores are as high as possible. And like I said, the way NSPIRE works is they place a real greater point deduction on resident units, where the resident spends the most of their time. So as I said, I want to talk a little bit about the differences between TDHCA HUD NSPIRE inspections and HUD NSPIRE inspections. Probably at least twice a week, I get a phone call from one of the developments. They'll ask me, they'll say, hey, Manuel, I just had a HUD NSPIRE inspection, and you guys have just scheduled me for an NSPIRE inspection through TDHCA. Can you use the HUD NSPIRE inspection in lieu of the TDHCA inspection? And unfortunately, we cannot, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So if your development is just a straight tax credit, just TDHCA funded, this is not for you. This is for those developments that have a HUD loan and also have TDHCA funding. If you have a HUD loan and you have funding from TDHCA, you're going to have a TDHCA NSPIRE inspection and you're going to have a HUD NSPIRE inspection. And we'll talk about what those differences are here in a second. So as I stated, TDHCA does not participate in HUD's physical inspection alignment program, and I get a lot of calls about this. The reason why we don't is because TDHCA conducts two different types of inspections in lieu of the NSPIRE inspection. What TDHCA inspectors are going to do is we're going to look, before we come out to your development, we're going to look at the development's lure to ensure that the amenities that are committed to are in place at the development of the time. We're also going to do a minimal accessibility check on your development. Those are the two types of inspections that HUD REACT inspectors do not do. So what TDHCA did is TDHCA adopted the NSPIRE protocol, NSPIRE standards themselves. We do not follow HUD REACT inspector protocols. So if you have a HUD REACT inspection, it's a totally different process than TDHCA NSPIRE inspections. We follow the same inspection standards, but we don't follow the HUD REACT inspector protocols. So there's a little bit difference between how you receive your report from HUD, how you receive your report from TDHCA, and how to respond. So please keep that in mind. We are completely separate entities. The two additional NSPIRE inspections that we conduct is an accessibility review and amenity. So what TDHCA inspectors do when we conduct NSPIRE is we're going to be walking your development and we're going to be looking to make sure that your development is in compliance with the required accessibility standard as well. If your development is required to meet fair housing, section 504, which is UFAS, or the 2010 ADA standards. TDHCA inspectors, as they're walking the site, we're going to be looking at your accessible routes. We're going to be looking to make sure that your amenities are accessible as well. These are some things that HUD REACT inspectors do not do when they conduct the NSPIRE inspections. And this is one of the main, these are the two main reasons why we don't share those reports with HUD anymore. HUD and REACT inspectors, they don't look at the accessibility and they don't check your development lures. TDHCA does. This is the reason why we don't share those reports. However, on the other side of that coin, you can ask HUD if they'll take the TDHCA NSPIRE inspection in lieu of their HUD inspection. HUD NSPIRE inspection. But unfortunately, TDHCA is not going to share those HUD inspection reports. We're not going to accept those as a TDHCA NSPIRE inspection for those two reasons, the accessibility check and the amenity check. Now, there's been several times when I conduct inspections And I'll notice that at the request of the tenant, the property manager will sometimes they'll place a barbecue pit and a grassy area up above the curb, or they'll put a dog waste station in a area that is not accessible. And a lot of times the property manager, I understand you want to listen to your tenant requests and you want to assist your tenants. However, keep in mind that if you add things to your development, you have to ensure that they are accessible or on an accessible route. If you add a barbecue pit and a picnic table, it has to be on an accessible route. You have to have one for everyone. If you provide an amenity, it has to be inclusive for everyone. Everyone has to be able to use it, even people that have mobility issues. So if you add a barbecue pit or a picnic table for your residents because they requested underneath the nice tree in the little grassy area, you have to make sure that you provide one that's on an accessible route. Or one thing common that we also see, like I said, is those dog waste stations. We see those planted everywhere around the property. If you plant those around the property, you have to have at least one of those that's on an accessible route that everybody can use. So these are the things that TDHCA inspects while we conduct our NSPIRE inspections. So here is a copy, just a kind of view of the limited accessibility check that we look at. And this form is also on our website. So we looking at your accessible route when we're walking through the property. We're going to be looking at your accessible route. We're going to be looking at your accessible parking, your common use doors, and your common use facilities. We're going to ensure, TDHCA inspectors are going to ensure that your amenities are accessible. These are some of the things that HUD REACT inspectors do not do. Unfortunately, that's why we are not accepting those HUD NSPIRE inspections. As I said, TDHCA inspectors will check the LURA before we come out to conduct your inspection. We're going to look at the LURA to determine what unit amenities and what common amenities are available on the development. And we make sure that those are in place as well. These are the things that HUD REACT inspectors do not do. So TDHCA inspectors are going to be conducting a minimal accessibility check, and we're also going to be checking for amenities that are in place that are required for the LURA. Like I said, I get about 3 or 4 calls a week in regards to the developments that have HUD funding and have TDHCA funding. They will call me and they say, Manuel, we just had a HUD NSPIRE inspection. Unfortunately, the answer is we're still going to come and conduct that inspection. But just wanted to make those two things clear for everyone, that TDHCA and HUD are separate entities. If you have a HUD loan and you have TDHCA funds, you're going to have an NSPIRE inspection from both entities. And those are the two reasons why. So TDHCA conducts these inspections, and we're going to look at the unit, the inside, and the outside. So HUD changed the inspectable areas from 5 areas to 3. So the old areas were, they had the site, the building systems, the building exteriors, the units, and the common areas. Now, NSPIRE changed those down to just 3 areas: the units, the inside, and the outside. The unit areas is pretty easy to understand what's inside the unit and what's inspectable inside the unit. I mean, it's everything in the unit. We'll talk about those here in a second. The outside, the same thing. It's pretty common knowledge to know what's on the exterior. The inside is where people kind of have a little bit of question about what the inspectable area is under the inside. And we'll talk about those in a second. So in the units, obviously, we're going to look at everything that's inside the unit: the bathrooms, the walls, the floors, the kitchens, countertops, smoke detectors, etc. in the units. And also, HUD also has some affirmative habitability requirements that they have. Now, these are non-scoring right now. However, they may be scoring in the future. So HUD under NSPIRE have some affirmative habitability requirements. I'm not going to read through every single one of those, but what HUD says is that you have hot and cold running water in the kitchen. Your battery, your smoke detectors have to be battery operated or hardwired. They have to be one on each level. Now, smoke detectors, that's a pretty big change on your smoke detectors now, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So these are some of the affirmative habitability requirements. Your living room and your kitchen area, where it has to have a sink, cooking appliance, refrigerator, food prep area, and food storage area. You have to meet the carbon monoxide detector requirements. All rooms have to have at least 2 working outlets, one working outlet, and a permanent light fixture. And outlets within 6 foot of a water source must be GFCI protected. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's a really big ticket item. We get a lot of questions about that. Fortunately, that is not a scoring item at the moment. And we'll talk about what those delayed scoring items are here in a moment as well. Guardrails, and you see, look at number 10, guardrails. They must have a guardrail that's an elevated walking surface. If there's a drop off of more than 30 inches measured vertically by a walking surface, that's a new deficiency. It's not in UPCS. Fortunately, right now is a non-scoring item. However, as I said, HUD will change these through Federal Register at least once every 3 years. So keep up with those changes. Also, one of the affirmative habitability requirements is you have to have a permanently mounted light fixture in the kitchen and each bathroom. So here's where we get a little bit of questions about what is considered inside and what is considered in the unit. So most common areas in the building systems are within the building interior and not inside a unit are considered inside. For instance, we have basements, garages, carports, restrooms, closets, any community rooms, mechanical rooms, halls, corridors, stairs, community kitchens, community facilities. Those are considered in the inside. Now, there's also some affirmative habitability requirements in the inside as well. These are kind of the same as the ones I talked about within the units, at least one battery operated or hardwired smoke detector on each level. You have to meet the carbon monoxide detector standards as well. Again, the outlets within 6 foot of a water source. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. Then you have the guardrails again. So some of these affirmative habitability requirements are the same as inside of your units as well. So the outside, it's pretty self-explanatory. Everything that we see on the outside is going to be categorized under the outside portion of NSPIRE. Everything on the outside, your walls, your building site, your fencing, retaining walls, your parking lots, driveways, storm drainage, all those things are going to be listed on the outside. Your gutter system components, your roofs, your walls, all those items are inspectable areas under the outside. So again, just to kind of reiterate, UPCS had 5 inspectable items. NSPIRE only has 3. They kind of condensed it down. You have the inside, the outside, and the units. So one of the great things that we like about NSPIRE is that there are no longer levels of deficiencies. So they did away with all the levels. So in the past, under UPCS, an inspector's conducting an inspection, they look at the wall, they see a hole in the wall. They'll, at that point under UPCS, they had to determine whether it's a level 1, level 2, or level 3. Now, one thing that we really like about NSPIRE, we think HUD got right, is that they eliminated all the levels. They take the guesswork out of deficiencies. It either is a deficiency or it's not. There's no more levels 1, 2s, and 3s. I think that's a great thing. So one thing that they did add that's probably not good for, it's great for the residents, but probably not at the property level. There's a lot of life-threatening and severe deficiencies. These deficiencies must be repaired within 24 hours. Now you have moderate deficiencies. Those must be repaired within 30 days. Low deficiencies must be repaired within 60 days. And TDHCA provides a 90-day corrective action period. We'll talk a little bit more about those life-threatening and severe deficiencies. So here's a thing that may not be that welcoming on the property level side, is that there are over 300 inspectable items or potential defects that are health and safety deficiencies, and over 100 of those are the 24-hour repair type. Now, if you remember under UPCS, I think there was only 9, maybe 10 health and safety deficiencies. So they changed the health and safety deficiencies to severe and life-threatening now. So UPCS, we still call them health and safety deficiencies. It's kind of an interchangeable between NSPIRE and UPCS, but NSPIRE has categorized those as severe and life-threatening. Now, as I said, there's over 100 of these types of deficiencies that are of the 24 repair type. And TDHCA understands that at the end of the inspection, if you have some of these health and safety deficiencies that need to be repaired within 24 hours, we may provide you an extension for good cause. However, you have to request that extension within 24 hours of your inspection. So at the end of your inspection, and when you're walking back with the inspector back to the office, he provides you the severe and life-threatening report, and you see there's a lot of health and safety deficiencies there that you know may not be able to be repaired within 24 hours. Please send us an email to our extension request email box and request an extension. On the email request, let us know that you're requesting an extension for X, Y, and Z deficiencies, and give us a good reason as to why you need those. Some of these health and safety deficiencies cannot be repaired within 24 hours because you may need to contact a third-party vendor to come out, and they have to schedule you. A lot of these vendors, they can't come within the 24 hours. So if you know that you're going to have some health and safety deficiencies that you're going to need some time to repair, please send us an email. TDHCA is now providing extensions for good cause. Under UPCS, like I said, there was only about 10 health and safety deficiencies that were the 24-hour repair type. So there was no extension for those. Under UPCS, you had to get those corrected within 24 hours and sent back to us within 72 hours, the owner certification that all those are corrected. Now, like I said, TDHCA understands there is over 100 of these defects that are the 24-hour type, so we can provide you extensions. So life-threatening deficiencies present a high risk of death. The severe deficiencies prevent a high risk of permanent disability or serious illness or injury. So here's a couple of the common life-threatening deficiencies that we see. They're still kind of the same as UPCS deficiencies. Smoke detectors. We see a lot of smoke detectors that are either not working, unplugged, or just missing. A lot of the tenants, sometimes, they'll just, take the battery out because it's beeping. If a TDHCA inspector finds that, then we're going to cite that. Some missing or damaged expired extinguishers. Those are big ticket items under NSPIRE. We had a development that had all of the fire extinguishers that did not have smoke detectors that were fully charged, and all of those failed. This property scored a 19. So as I said before, NSPIRE places a really, really high point deduction on resident units. So within those resident units, if you have smoke detectors and fire extinguishers, smoke detectors are non-scoring items, but if you have the fire extinguishers are scoring. Please ensure that those fire extinguishers are charged and ready to go. Exposed wires and open panels, an unprotected outlet that's within 6 foot of a water source, infestation, and GFCIs. So here's kind of an example of an obstructed means of egress. You'll see the lock. Can't have any of those locks on the exterior of the doors. Those are considered obstructed means of egress. Here's another example of some obstructed means of egress. You can see the lock is on the exterior of the door. Can't have those locks on the exterior of the doors. On the other side, you see the double cylinder locks. Can't have double cylinder locks either. Those are considered obstructed means of egress. As I talked about, the fire extinguishers. If you have missing fire extinguishers, or if there is a expired fire extinguisher, or if it's damaged, this is a big ticket item. Like I said before, we had an inspection. We conducted an inspection, and every single one of those units had expired fire extinguishers. Now, there's two types of fire extinguishers. Just want to talk a little bit about the fire extinguishers. There's disposable and there's rechargeable. If there's a disposable fire extinguisher in your unit, we're going to check to see that the gauge is in the correct location, or that's within 12 years of the manufacture date. There's usually a date on the bottom that's stamped onto the fire extinguisher. Those are rechargeable. And there's also, those are not rechargeable. Those are the disposables. So if you have disposables, those are good for 12 years. If you have rechargeables, we're going to check to see that that gauge is in the correct location. So you want to make sure that your fire extinguishers are correct, they're in place, and they're not damaged, and if they're rechargeable, that they're fully charged. Like I said, that's a big ticket item under life-threatening and severe deficiencies. And you're going to have a really high deduction of points if we find those in all of your units. Another common deficiency that we see are exposed electrical conductors. So we advise you all to check your electrical panels, because TDHCA inspectors are going to be looking as they walk through the unit. They're going to be checking the electrical panels as well. We're going to look in there to make sure that there's no gaps or if there's any missing breakers. That's a really big ticket item as well. So you want to make sure that your breaker panels, first of all, are not blocked. They're accessible, and there is no gaps more than a half inch gap within there, or if there's any missing breakers. You can see this picture here. There's a missing breaker. That's a pretty big ticket item. That's going to have a pretty good deduction of points, especially in the units. So here's another common deficiency that we see. It's a misaligned chimney flue there. Now, there is another NSPIRE deficiency in this, and I want to see if anybody can figure out what that is. Kara, I'm going to let them give them a moment to kind of type in the chat what they think the next deficiency is. The obvious deficiency is a gas-fired water heater that has the misaligned chimney flue. But there's one more deficiency in there that's under NSPIRE that was not under UPCS. So there's some really big changes with the hot water heaters now. Kara, let me know if people have guessed what the second deficiency is.
We've got one person that says the discharge tube goes up, the route of water flow, shut-off valve.
That is 100% correct. So now NSPIRE states that you cannot have an upward slip on your pressure relief valve. So if you look there, you can see the pressure relief valve. It has an upward slope. It comes all the way around. These discharge pipes, now NSPIRE changed these. It's a really big change from UPCS on the hot water heaters from the old standard. NSPIRE has a lot of different types of deficiencies now for water heaters. The upward slope, the type of material on the piping is you can't have any PVC. You can tell that's a CPVC. CPVC is okay, or PEX is okay, or copper is okay, but you can't have regular PVC on those discharge pipes. That's a new deficiency. We're not going to get into all the types of deficiencies because we have a very short amount of time. But yes, that's a very good eye. So that we can't have any more upward slopes. That's a new NSPIRE deficiency. That's different from UPCS. Another thing we also see is mold. Mold is another common deficiency that we see. There's several types of mold. If it's more than 4 inches, then it's a moderate deficiency. But if it gets up to, it's cumulative. So if it gets up to more than 9 square foot, it's going to be a life-threatening and severe deficiency. And you can tell we don't really see this type of mold in units. This was an inspection on a vacant unit where the hot water heater in the above unit had leaked, and there was nobody living in this unit. So when we conducted our inspection, we obviously TDHCA inspectors are required to inspect vacant units that are vacant longer than 30 days. So this was one of the units that was selected that was vacant longer than 30 days, and we walked into it, and like I said, it was unoccupied, but the unit above was occupied. They had a leak that probably had been leaking for several months or maybe even a year that they didn't really know about. And this is the type of damage that it causes. So you want to make sure that you have your vacant units inspected and occupied as soon as possible, because these types of situations can happen in those vacant units if you're not inspecting those vacant units, or if you're not leasing those vacant units up. You can have a leak, or you can have some damage in there that can really cause a lot of damage. Now this small leak that could have been mitigated quickly by making a quick repair, and if the property would have just kind of walked their vacant units or had rented this unit out in a timely manner, this type of deficiency wouldn't have occurred. So you really want to make sure that you get your units leased up as quickly as possible. And just keep in mind that if you have units that are vacant longer than 30 days, TDHCA will inspect those units. We're going to be selecting those units for inspection to ensure that they're suitable for occupancy and ready to be leased. Infestation. Infestation is another common health safety deficiency that we see. They're called life-threatening and severe, but like I said, we kind of interchange health and safety with life-threatening and severe. So just kind of bear with me when I talk about life-threatening and severe. We call them health and safety. If you talk about health and safety deficiencies, everybody knows what we're talking about. So infestation is another big ticket item that we see. So you want to make sure that you're doing your quarterly checks on your units or your biannual inspection checks, and make sure that you're treating your units for infestation. If you don't treat your units for infestation, those critters can crawl to the next unit, and you can have some pretty extensive infestation. Talk a little bit about some non-scoring deficiencies. Now, these are non-scoring deficiencies. However, these must be still repaired within 24 hours. Any smoke alarm defects, any carbon monoxide device defects, call for aid systems that are blocked, or the pull cord that is higher than 6 inches off the floor, or any handrail defects. Handrail is another deficiency that we check for as well. If there's any handrails that are missing or installed or not installed where required, those are non-scoring defects that need to be repaired within 24 hours. So please keep that in mind. If you have any handrails on your stairs anywhere, the inspector is going to walk by. They're going to just put a general amount of force on there to ensure that they're secure. So if they're not secure, we're going to cite those as deficient as well, and those need to be repaired within 24 hours. So these are some more of the delayed scoring deficiencies, and we just got a Federal Register note from HUD not too long ago about the extended these delayed scoring deficiencies. So these are not going to be scored until October 1st of 2025. However, if we do find these types of deficiencies, they're going to be they're not scored. However, they need to be repaired as soon as quickly as possible. So any fire labeled door defects, and I talked a little bit about that earlier about the types of doors now. Now, like I said, UPCS only had one door deficiency. Now, NSPIRE breaks it down into 3 different types of doors. You have fire label doors, you have entry doors, and then you have standard doors. So please be mindful of those types of doors. Any guardrail defects or any GFCIs that are unprotected that are within 6 foot of a water source. Now, what does that mean? An unprotected outlet that is present within 6 foot of a water source. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, but most unprotected outlets, if it's not dedicated to a major appliance or underneath a cabinet, or is not GFCI protected, or not in a series that is GFCI protected, and it's within 6 foot of a water source, it's going to be cited as deficient. Right now, it's a non-scoring deficiency, but it still needs to be repaired as soon as possible. And also the HVAC deficiencies. We advise you to take a look at the HVAC deficiencies. Those are some major changes with NSPIRE as opposed to UPCS. Now, they have different dates for different time zones on where the degree can be at. So we'd really advise you to pay attention to those and look at those HVAC deficiencies under NSPIRE. So they have different times as well for the HVAC deficiencies. Like I said, we really advise you to kind of read through the HVAC deficiencies because there is time frames for the required degree in the unit, and it's for different times from October 1 through March 31st if the temperature is below 64 degrees, and between April 1 and September 30th. There's a lot of different types of deficiencies under the HVAC, so we really advise you to read through those deficiencies. These are kind of the habitable requirements as well. We talked a little bit about that earlier, where you have to have at least one permanently installed light fixture that is present in the kitchen or bathroom, or at least 2 working outlets that are present within each habitable room, or at least 1 working outlet or 1 permanently installed light fixture within each room. Those are new affirmative habitability requirements. That's a tongue twister. So we advise you to take a look at those as well. So we're going to talk a little about those common deficiencies that we see. Some of the most common deficiencies that we see, obviously, this is going to be an unprotected GFCI outlet within 6 foot of water source. Now, I get a lot of questions about what a dedicated outlet is. Now, this one here, this outlet, TDHCA does not consider this a dedicated outlet to a major appliance, because you can see this is a duplex outlet. There's 2 outlet portions where you can plug in an appliance. That is not considered a TDHCA does not consider that a dedicated outlet. A dedicated outlet is going to be a single plug outlet. So if this was a GFCI protected, if it was if this outlet in this place, this location was in series with the GFCI, it would be okay. This particular deficiency that you're looking at on the screen was not GFCI protected. It was not in a series. It was not protected at a breaker. So this was a deficiency for a unprotected outlet within 6 foot of a water source. And that's the deficiency there. An unprotected outlet is present within 6 foot of a water source. You can also see that it's affirmative habitability requirement, and it's also cited in the unit, the outside, and the inside. So it can be 3 different locations on where we can cite this deficiency at. So here I want to talk about the more information. If you look at the bottom, I get a lot of questions about why is this not yes, ma'am.
Can you go back to the previous slide and go over that one more time? We've got somebody that asked if it could be repeated.
What's the question?
They just said, can you repeat that again right when you were talking about this slide?
I said a lot. So let's see. So this particular outlet, when we conducted an inspection, was not GFCI protected. It was not a dedicated outlet to a major appliance, which is a single plug outlet. It was not protected at the breaker, and it was not in series with a GFCI protected outlet. So this is an outlet that was in 6 foot of a water source that was not GFCI protected. It's in the unit, in the outside, and the inside. So I hope I answered that question. If not, I'm available to answer that type of question if you have any questions about that. Okay, maybe I answered the question. So I want to talk about the more. Go ahead, Carol.
I was going to say we have several questions. You had a good flow, so I was going to wait till the end. But I do have 2 that came through on the GFCI stuff. If you want me to go ahead and ask those now.
Sure, go ahead.
So we've got one. It says, is this outlet a dedicated outlet? Would it not be required to be a GFCI?
Okay, so here is the outlet that we consider a dedicated outlet. So if you see on the screen, there's a GFCI protected outlet, and then there is what we consider a dedicated outlet. A dedicated outlet, TDHCA considers it to be a single plug outlet. So the one on the right, if you see the plug on the right, if it was that single plug there, it wouldn't be deficient because that outlet would be dedicated to that major appliance. So that there should be one of those types of plugs that we see in this location here, whether it needs to be either GFCI protected, a dedicated outlet, which you see on the right, or if it's a single plug outlet, if it's a duplex outlet like you see there, if it was in series with a GFCI protected outlet, or if it was on an arc fault breaker at the breaker panel, it would not be deficient. But this particular deficiency here, this outlet was not protected. It was not GFCI protected. It was not in series with a GFCI protected outlet. It was not an outlet that is dedicated to a major appliance, and it was not protected at the breaker panel. So I think that the idea on these deficiencies is so water would not penetrate into the electrical circuit there. I think that's what HUD is trying to cover, any water penetrating into those outlets that can cause water leaks near electrical equipment. I hope I answered your questions. If not, please let me know.
We do have a couple more before.
Sure, go ahead.
So before I ask these questions, I do want to let everybody know, as he's talked about these kind of hot topics, I've put the NSPIRE standard kind of cheat sheet in the chat, and I've put the link to all of the NSPIRE standards in the chat as well, and they're in alphabetical order. So if the GFCI one is in the chat, if you want to look at that after this. But I think this is a good question because it kind of gives you a jumping off point. The screen where you've got the connection box for the washer and dryer or for the washing machine, and then you've got the unprotected outlet. They're asking, would that not be the builder's fault?
Well, I guess it doesn't really matter because it's, TDHCA inspectors are not going to determine who is at fault. We're just going to cite it as deficient. That's all TDHCA inspectors do. We're just collecting the data and we're citing deficiencies. So on your end, you can decide whose fault that is. It just needs to be repaired the way NSPIRE requires it to be repaired. So we're not going to determine who's at fault. That's not what TDHCA inspectors do. We just cite the deficiencies as they are. And if you want to determine who's at fault, that's on you. That's going to be on your end.
Kara, when Manuel's talking, remember to mute because we're getting feedback from you.
Yes, I forgot that. I apologize.
I hope that answers the question. And I really appreciate questions. Kind of helps break up my presentation. So yeah, keep asking the questions. That's what we're here for. We're here to kind of help you all understand how NSPIRE is how we inspect NSPIRE on your. And this is a pretty big ticket item here. We get a lot of questions about those GFCI protected outlets within 6 feet of the water source. I hope I answered that question. If there's any others, Kara, please let me know.
We can go ahead and keep going, and then we can go through all the questions when you're done.
Okay, great. Is there any other questions about that?
There are about 7.
Okay. Go ahead and ask me a couple. We'll see if we can get through those. That's what we're here for.
If our bathroom has the GFCI outlet, will that cover the laundry room as long as it's 6 feet? Maybe that's supposed to be inches or 6 feet.
Can you repeat that?
If our bathroom has the GFCI outlet, will that cover the laundry room as long as it's 6 feet?
I think your laundry room would have its own separate outlets. So I'm not sure if I understand that question, but if let me just kind of talk a little bit about that. If you have a bathroom and they're GFCI protected in the bathroom, and you have a separate room, there's no foot requirement for separate rooms. This is just a per room deficiency. So your laundry area is going to have its own outlets. There's going to be an outlet for your laundry area. If you do have an outlet for a laundry, it needs to be either one of these types, a GFCI protected outlet, or it needs to be a dedicated outlet. This is what TDHCA considers a dedicated outlet, which is a single plug outlet. Or like I said, it could be in series with a GFCI protected outlet, or it could be protected at the breaker. So when we conduct inspections, there's a lot of rooms that are on arc fault breakers. An arc fault breaker is at the breaker panel. That means that the whole room is wired to that arc fault breaker. If that room is wired to an arc fault breaker, then that you can have that type of plug because it is protected at some point. Hope I answered that question.
I think you did, and you answered another one during the meantime. We had a GFCI finding in laundry rooms on a property built in 2016. Why would that not have been caught during construction inspections?
That's an excellent question. Well, the reason why is because it probably wasn't in code at that time. It depends on what municipality the code was adopted at that time. 2016, NSPIRE wasn't effective until TDHCA didn't start conducting NSPIRE inspections until January 1 of 2024. So that's when that became. So it just really depends on your municipality, what code was adopted during that time. I think, gosh, I don't know exactly what code requires GFCI protected, but there's a lot of older developments where this issue is going to be common at, because at the time of construction, the code that was adopted in your municipality probably didn't require those GFCI protected outlets near water sources. So it really depends on what the code that was adopted within that municipality at the time that your development was constructed. But now NSPIRE requires these outlets to be either dedicated or GFCI protected. So it's really not a really huge fix. There's really like 3 wires, maybe 3 or 4 wires behind you. Pull it out, you reconnect your wires, your hot, your ground, and your neutral. You plug it back in. So it's really not a really big ticket. It can be if you have 240 units. If you have GFCI GFCI outlets, those can be a little costly. But if you get a single plug outlet, those are a lot less expensive than GFCI outlets. And it's just a matter of pulling the switch plate cover off, unhooking the wires, and hooking it back in and putting it back in. So yeah. So like I said, if it's protected at the breaker, if it's in series with a GFCI protected breaker, or if it's on a GFCI itself, or if it's one of the single plug outlets, it would be fine. Just can't have the duplex outlet within 6 foot of a water source that is unprotected. Shall I continue, or is there other questions? We'll be available after to answer any questions as well.
I think in the interest of time, let's keep going through the presentation, and then we'll run through questions at the end.
Sounds good. All right. So here's another common deficiency. This is another common deficiency that we see under NSPIRE. It was common under UPCS as well. However, there are a lot of different changes with smoke detectors. Smoke detectors are really big, really big changes there. So on this particular deficiency, you can see that it's too close to it's a ceiling mounted, and it's too close to the wall there. It can't be within 4 inches of the wall. Here's another deficiency here. It is within 4. It's a wall-mounted smoke detector that is within 4 inches of the ceiling, and it's really too close to that vent there. Can't have smoke detectors now. Have to be 1 on each level. Have to, if it's wall-mounted, there's a certain area that it has to be. It can't be more than 4 inches from a wall. If it's a wall-mounted, can't be more than 4 inches from the ceiling, and it can't be further than 12 inches down, and it can't be close to a window, a vent fan, as you can see in this picture here, or a ceiling fan. And it has to be within 21 feet of a door. There's a lot of changes for smoke detectors. So here's some deficiencies. There's several types. It has to be installed in the sleeping room within 21 foot of a door. Each level has to have a smoke detector. Ceiling mounted, if it's less than 4 inches from a wall, it's a deficiency. Wall mounted, if it's within 4 inches of a ceiling, it's a deficiency. Wall mounted, if it's more than 12 inches from the ceiling, it's a deficiency. Obviously, if it's painted or has stickers on the detection, it's not that's present, it's deficiency. If the smoke alarm is missing, obstructed, or does not produce an audio or visual sound, it's deficient. So there's a lot of deficiencies with smoke detectors. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions about that as well. Just make sure that your smoke detectors are in place, they're working, and that you follow the NSPIRE standards. Another new deficiency with NSPIRE is that they have to be either hardwired together, or they have to have a 10-year sealed battery. They have to be 10-year sealed battery smoke detectors. So if you have smoke detectors that are that do not meet any of those standards, it's going to be deficient. So we advise you all to really look at the NSPIRE deficiency standards. One, smoke detectors is a pretty big change from the UPCS inspection standards. And I'll be available to answer any questions about smoke detectors as well. I know there's a lot of questions because I get a lot of questions about smoke detectors and about GFCIs, and obviously that's why they're on this presentation, because these are the common things that I get a lot of questions about. These are a lot of common deficiencies, and these are some new deficiencies. So here's another common deficiency that we see as well. Now, on this one, you can tell that the discharge pipe is of copper. The material is correct. However, the termination point has to be within 2 to 6 inches of that floodplain there. So on this deficiency, the PRV discharge pipe, the copper pipe, is in that floodplain. So there has to be a 2 to 6 inch air gap here in this location here. You can see it's in there. So that's another new deficiency under NSPIRE, and that's a pretty common one. So please be mindful of your GFC eyes, your outlets within 6 foot of a water source. Be mindful of your smoke detector placements. Be mindful of your hot water heaters. And whoever cited that earlier, absolutely 100% correct. The new standard says that a pressure relief discharge pipe cannot have an upward slope. You can tell that this one is piped up. We see this is pretty common that we see that they're piped up. These have to be piped down, and they have to have a 2 to 6 inch air gap from the floodplain or from the termination point, and it has to be of the correct material. So big changes with hot water heaters as well for NSPIRE, as opposed to how we inspected in the past with UPCS inspections. So these are just some of the types of deficiencies that you see with the hot water heaters. Obviously, if there's no hot water or the PRV is missing, if it doesn't have a greater than 62 inch from the flood level, the chimney flue is misaligned or blocked, the gas shutoff valve is damaged, missing, or not installed, or there is an upward slope. So there's quite a few deficiencies for the hot water heaters as well, which is different from the old standard of UPCS. Another thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be carrying around these circuit testers. So be mindful that the inspections may take just a little bit longer because we need to check all of your outlets. We need to ensure that they are wired correctly. If they're not wired correctly, we're going to cite those as deficient. I don't advise all of my inspectors to move resident material or resident items to get to the outlets. If it's easily accessible, we're going to check all those. We're not going to be moving people's sofas around to get to those. But every single outlet that we check that's easily accessible, we're going to be checking them with our outlet testers to ensure that they are wired correctly. So that's another change from UPCS to NSPIRE. So just kind of bear with our inspectors that it may take us a little bit longer than past to do UPCS as it is to do NSPIRE, because there's other things that we're checking for now that NSPIRE requires that UPCS didn't require as well. And like I said, we're not going to be moving a lot of resident items out of the way to get to every single outlet, but we're going to be checking your outlets to ensure that they are wired correctly. Here's another big ticket item. You wouldn't think that a missing outlet cover plate would have a major defect in your unit on your points, but it does. You want to make sure that all your outlets and switch cover plates are in place. So if we do find a lot of those, you can have a high point deduction for those really simple repairs. So be advised that all your outlets and your switch cover plates need to have those covers in order to not be deficient or have a high deduction. So these are pretty big ticket items. These are items that are easily repaired, that can be avoided, that we suggest that you repair and to be mindful of, because they can have a really high impact of deduction of points on your score. So you can see here outlet switch is damaged, or it's improperly grounded, or the outlet is inoperable, or if there's an exposed electrical conductor, if there's a gap of a ½ inch, if it's not enclosed properly, or there is water in contact with the electrical conductor. Those are all life-threatening and severe that need to be repaired within 24 hours. So just a quick question to everybody. Is this an NSPIRE deficiency? I'll give everybody a little bit of time. Kara, let me know if anybody answers yes or no. It's just a simple yes or no. Do you think this is an NSPIRE deficiency? Give everybody just a little bit of time. Kind of take a look at that.
Mostly yeses are coming through with a couple of nos.
Yeah, so this is quite a bit of a change. So resident-owned property is not evaluated as an obstruction. So if we see this was a really common deficiency under UPCS. NSPIRE says that resident-owned items blocking a window is not a deficiency. So, however, TDHCA advises the property managers and property owners not let your residents block any windows. However, it's not recordable under NSPIRE. You can see there, resident-owned property should not be evaluated as an obstruction to a rescue opening. So, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to view it, that is no longer a deficiency under NSPIRE. Back in UPCS days, I can do an inspection under UPCS, and I guarantee there would be probably 5 or 6 of the units that I inspected had that type of deficiency of some sort of blocking of the window from the resident-owned item. But TDHCA does not advise that you allow your residents to have items blocking any rescue openings. So we advise that you at the property level to kind of ensure that your residents don't block any of your windows. However, if it's a resident-owned item, we are not going to cite that as an obstruction, and it's not a deficiency under NSPIRE. So another question, do you think this is an NSPIRE deficiency? In the present condition that we see here, this is a cord across a walkway. Give everybody just a few moments to type in yes or no. Do you think this is an NSPIRE deficiency? This is a resident unit, and it looks like there is a cable cord across the walkway. Kara, how is everybody citing this deficiency? I think it's yes or no.
Resounding yes.
Resounding yes. Well, according to NSPIRE, if it's a trip hazard, it must be greater than 3/4 of an inch in vertical difference. So most of those cords are probably about 1/4 inch. The condition that this cord is in, at its condition, it's not a 3/4 inch vertical difference. So this here is not a deficiency. However, on the other side of the coin, However, if that cord was wrapped, or if there was a kink or a twist in that cord, or it was raised at least 3/4 of an inch, it would be deficiency. But in this present condition, that is not an NSPIRE deficiency, because NSPIRE says that the difference in vertical difference must be at least 3/4 of an inch. So we don't advise you to allow those cords to be in the walkways in your units. For trip hazards, of course, obviously, old UPCS days, I guaranteed when I did an inspection, at least 3 or 4 of the units had that type of deficiency. But under NSPIRE, if it's less than 3/4 of an inch, it's not a deficiency. So this is under NSPIRE. This would be considered a standard door. This is looks like a closet door. It's not an entry door, and it's not a fire label door. Do you think this is an NSPIRE deficiency? It's like someone punched a hole through the door. Not through the door, but on the door. Yes or no? Give everybody just a few moments to answer the question. And Kara, let me know what the overall response is, yes or no. I'm sure by now you're like, wait a minute, are these trick questions now?
You're getting a mix here, and some people say they're answering one way because the others they were wrong on, so they feel like you're tricking them.
I know it is. But this is how NSPIRE is developed. So as bad as this looks, this is not a deficiency. So the deficiency for a door requires the hole to penetrate through the door to compromise privacy. So in this present condition, if an inspector sees this and privacy has not been compromised, this is not a deficiency. This is a passage door between rooms. If the door opens and closes and operates as intended and privacy is not compromised, that is not a deficiency. Now, is this an NSPIRE deficiency? Door opens and closes and operates as intended. However, you can see a hole that has punched all the way through the door. that is a deficiency because privacy has been compromised. So you can see it is it's a little bit different. UPCS, the old standard of UPCS, like I said, I guaranteed when we conducted inspection, we would see those blocked egresses, resident-owned items. We would see trip hazards, across walkways, and we would see doors that are punched in. Now, NSPIRE says if it's a resident-owned item, it is not a deficiency. If it's not more than 3/4 of an inch of vertical difference on that trip hazard, it is not a deficiency. And if it's a passage door, not an entry or not a fire labeled door, if it's a passage door and it has the door operates as intended and privacy has not been compromised in this present condition, that is not a deficiency under NSPIRE. So our inspectors are not going to cite that as deficient. However, we do request that you make sure that you fix those, but we're not going to cite it as a deficiency because NSPIRE says it is not a deficiency because the door operates as intended, it closes, it locks, and privacy has not been compromised. However, if we do see this on a standard door, the door opens, closes, but privacy has been compromised, that is a deficiency. So some pretty big changes there. Now, in talking about doors, just want to reiterate, if you have fire labeled doors, your fire labeled doors need to be in near perfect condition. Because if there's any type of defect on a fire labeled door, it's going to be a deficiency. So just keep in mind that you have fire labeled doors, you have standard doors, and you have entry doors. So just want to reiterate, fire labeled doors need to be in near perfect condition. So that is all I have for this presentation. I think we finished a little bit early. It was just an hour-and-a-half training, and we probably finished quite a bit early. That's pretty much all I have right now. I mean, I can answer any questions. Kara, was there any questions?
A ton, so don't leave.
Okay. Yeah, I can toggle back to those pictures also.
Okay, I'm going to run through questions, and I'll mute myself after I ask them. The first question is, every single barbecue pit needs to be accessible or just one?
That's an excellent question. So in regards to amenities, it depends on the accessibility standard in place at your development. The accessibility standard is dependent upon when your development was first constructed for occupancy or when your development was funded. Because we have 3 different standards of accessibility. We have fair housing, we have UFAS, and we have 2010 ADA standards. So if your development is required to meet the 2010 ADA standard, then all your amenities have to be accessible. If your development needs to just meet the UFAS standard, UFAS states, the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standard states that only one of each type of those amenities need to be accessible. So that's a very good question with probably not the answer you're looking for. So it really depends on what your accessibility standard is at your development. And like I said, it depends on the date of first construction and when your development was constructed. I'm sorry, when your development was constructed for first occupancy and when your development was funded through TDHCA. So it really depends.
Thank you. Then the next question is, we have to have carbon monoxide detectors.
Another great question. So if you have a fuel burning appliance, then you have to have if you have a fuel burning appliance, or if your development has attached garages, then you have to have a carbon monoxide detector. But if your development does not have any attached garages and you're all electric, you're not required to have a carbon monoxide detector.
What is the email for the extension on health and safety?
Great question. It's going to be compliance.extensionrequest@tdhca.texas.gov. And when our inspectors conduct if our inspector conducts an inspection or one of our contractors conducts an inspection, at the end of the inspection, we're going to provide you with that report, and we're going to provide you an owner certification that needs to be submitted to us within 72 hours of your inspection. And on that owner certification, it has all the information that you need. And that email is going to be on that certification. But for you all, it's going to be compliance extension request@tdhca.texas.gov.
Okay, next question. Thank you for that. I've put that in the chat as well.
Thank you, Carol.
So for a resident who has mental illness and hoards and has roaches, if the property has done a roach clean out, but it did not work, and the tenant will not do the work to keep the roaches away, what's the recourse there?
That's a property level. That's a property level decision. You know, we can't tell you. TDHCA inspectors are advised not to tell you all how to make repairs for liability purposes. So we only cite deficiencies, and we review your corrective action, and we determine if it's acceptable or not. Unfortunately, we can't tell you how to make those repairs. So that's going to be a property level issue yeah, we do see that comment. Unfortunately, we cannot provide that information.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, do disposable fire extinguishers not need to be tagged and inspected?
That's a great question, and you're 100% correct. If it's disposable, we're just going to look at that gauge. If it's in the green, or we're going to look at the bottom to see if it's within 12 years. So NSPIRE says that disposables can be up to 12 years old. As long as it's in the pressure gauge is in the green section, that means it's charged and ready to go. That's all we're going to look at. If it's rechargeable, those are required to be inspected because those have to maintain a pressure. Those are required to be inspected annually. So there's two types. If it's disposable, it doesn't need to be tagged. We're not looking for a tag. If it's rechargeable, we're looking for the tag.
Thank you. The next question, it's more of a comment, and it kind of goes back to the GFCI conversation. They said that the housing authorities are already hitting them with that deficiency, and so they just had to change it all out in the laundry room. So that's obviously, like you were saying, a very big thing and a very kind of important thing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, so HUD is conducting their inspections, and we're, like I said, we're two separate entities, but we use the same standard. So NSPIRE says that all outlets within 6 foot of a water source, if it's not GFCI protected, in series with the GFCI protected at the breaker or on arc vault, or underneath a cabinet, or if it's dedicated to a major appliance, then it's going to be deficient. So that's a really, really big ticket item right there. Now, like I said, I get a lot of questions about that. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about that. And like I said, if you have any questions for us, we're here to answer any questions in regards to that.
So in keeping with the GFCIs, the question is, that's not per code, that's the HUD standard. Is that right?
That is correct. It just depends on what municipality your code has adopted. If you're in a municipality that has an older standard, and I can't remember off the top of my head where that code started. I don't want to say, because I don't know if it's 16 or 18, but one of the newer standards of codes requires the GFCI protected outlets. But we have a lot of developments that are older, that are in municipalities where sometimes they don't even have code. And that's kind of what NSPIRE is. It's kind of a mishmash of fire code, a building code, and kind of UPCS, kind of all mashed up together. So NSPIRE pulls in some fire code. NSPIRE also pulls in some residential codes, some electrical code. So yeah, it's going to be dependent upon your municipality and what that code is adopted at in that location. So you can be in a municipality where it's not required per code, but if you have funding from TDHCA or if you have funding from HUD, it's going to be required to be GFCI protected.
Thank you. So just to confirm, in a common area laundry facility, the washers should have GFCI outlets.
If common area, most of the time they're going to be protected at the breaker. Usually they'll have an arc fault, because if you have a common area laundry and there's a bunch of outlets there, they usually protect those. They can usually protect those at the breaker. But if it's not protected at the breaker, then yes, they all need to be GFCI protected. So we're going to be looking at that as well.
What if it's a 2-plug outlet? Does it not have to be a GFCI then, or does it still need to be a GFCI?
Can you repeat that, please?
If it is a 2-plug outlet, then it does not have to be a GFCI and then a question mark. So I'm guessing, or they want to know if that's right or not.
So if it is a 2-plug outlet, it's a duplex outlet. Then if it, like I said, if it's not protected in a series with the GFCI, not protected at the breaker, then it is deficient. So it either has to be a GFCI outlet or a outlet that's dedicated to that appliance. And this single plug outlet is what TDHCA is interpreting that dedicated outlet to be. So if it's just a duplex outlet, it's not GFCI protected, not in series with the GFCI or protected at the breaker, then it is deficient. So you want to have it GFCI, or you want to have a single plug outlet, or, like I said, you can put it in series with a GFCI. If you have a GFCI in the room that is not within 6 foot of a water source, but it's plugged in series with that outlet, we're going to test that other outlet. So, and if it's in series and it's protected at the GFCI on a different plug in series, it wouldn't be deficient. But our inspectors will check that. So if it's just a duplex outlet, it's going to be deficient if it's not protected.
Okay, that actually answered the next question. What about the garbage disposal? Does it need to be on a GFCI?
That's a great question. Remember, I also said that if it's underneath a cabinet, it is not a deficiency. Let's see. Should be here somewhere. So if it's underneath, so if it's a garbage disposal, it's underneath the cabinet. There's probably not going to be any water that accesses it, so it is not going to be deficient for the garbage disposal.
Great, thank you.
Oh. Here it is. It's right here. It says an outlet located below a countertop and within a enclosed cabinet will not be evaluated under this standard, regardless of the distance of its water. So there you go.
Perfect.
Great question.
What if an older site is no longer using the laundry connections? Can the faucets be capped and the area covered, but then keep the same outlet that's not GFCI?
That's a pretty specific question. Can you repeat that, please?
If they are no longer using the laundry connections, can they cap off the water source and keep the outlet that doesn't meet the GFCI requirements?
So if you cap off a water source, it's still going to be a pressurized line. Then there's still going to be water. If you cap off a water line, it's still pressured. There's still water in that line if it's just capped off. So technically, there's still water near that electrical outlet. I hope that answers the question.
I think it's good. If the discharge hose runs into a drain pipe, is that acceptable?
For a hot water heater?
Yes.
Where does it terminate? That would be my question. Does it?
I will see if they have.
That would be my question. If I'm conducting an inspection and I see a discharge pipe that goes into a drain line, within it, I would ask, where does the drain line terminate? Where's the termination point at? Sometimes we'll see hot water heaters that are piped out of the building. Sometimes the hot water heater is on an exterior wall, inside a unit on an exterior wall that pipes out the building and goes out. We're going to go outside. We're going to look at that termination point. I did an inspection last month, and there was a drain line on the floor, and it terminated right into the drain, but there was no 2 to 6 inch air gap. I saw the termination point. It was probably maybe a 2 inch drain pipe that was in the floor, but I can see the termination point, which was probably about an inch within that, and it was cited as deficient because you have to have a 2 to 6 inch air gap. So I guess that would be a case by case basis. I think the inspector would have to see where the termination point is on that one. So that was kind of hard to answer.
Okay, I also gave them your email address, so maybe y'all can have an offline conversation about that.
Yeah. And what I would suggest is to send us some pictures. And if you have questions, if you send me specific questions, if you can send me a couple of pictures, that would definitely help kind of see the scenario that you're talking about.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome. Thank you. So the next question is about blocked egresses. When you were talking about the door getting a hole punched in it, the question is, what if it blocks the door from opening all the way with regards to the blocked egress? So like a piece of furniture, like a dresser that's making it to where the door can only open part of the way.
The entry or exit door of the bedroom is blocked by a piece of furniture. Is that the question?
I think so, that maybe the tenant has, like in a bedroom where the door opens, if it opened all the way, it would hit a blank wall, and they've put their dresser there, and now it won't open all the way.
Well, yeah, if I can't get into the room to inspect, then yeah, I'm definitely gonna, cite that.
Okay, next. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you really don't want to block those the entry doors. You don't want to block the entry or exit of a door because you obviously can't get in or out. It would just that like I said, that is a case by case scenario where I would have to see how far the door opens, how much is blocked. But just as a rule of thumb, you don't want to have any of those doors. You want to have full access on your doors. So if a resident has a piece of furniture by a entry or exit door of the unit, then I would definitely move that out of the way or ask the tenant to move that. And I would have to see how much the door opens. Does it open at 45 degrees? Does it open at 30 degrees? I mean, I would just have to see what the scenario is on that to determine if it would be deficient or not. So, but you don't want anything blocking doors.
Okay. So the next question is, if the window is blocked by tenant furniture, will the inspector climb on the bed to check the window?
How would we access the window if it's blocked by a piece of furniture is my question. So if there is a bed and I can access the window, then we're going to check the window. I mean, me personally, I wouldn't jump on someone's bed, but I would ask the maintenance staff or I would ask the office staff to, open the window for me so I can see that it opens, it stays open, that it operates as intended. I mean, our inspectors, we try not to touch resident items as much, as least as possible. So we would ask the on-site staff to assist us with checking those windows. So we would ask them to get on the bed.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, when we were talking about the cord, like a vacuum cord or whatever crossing over the walkway. The question is to confirm that a resident-owned item over 3/4 of an inch would then be a deficiency. Is that correct? So if that cord had been larger.
Yeah, the resident-owned item is just for blocked egress. So if this cord was, cord was in the walkway and it was kind of tangled up where it did meet that 3/4 inch of vertical difference, then we would cite it as deficient. So resident-owned item is specific to the blocked egresses.
Okay, the next question is, if the resident removes a bedroom door, is that a deficiency? And if so, how do they need to explain that that is a deficiency to the tenant, which I think is the property side. So yes, it's a deficiency, or no, it's not.
So that's a great question, and that's kind of a 2-point question. So the first thing the inspector would ask is, if the door is removed, is it removed for a reasonable accommodation request? If it was removed as a reasonable accommodation request, then the inspector would just kind of maybe just verify through paperwork when we get back to the office that there is a reasonable accommodation request that resident asked to remove that door for. If it is a reasonable accommodation request that the tenant asked to move that door for whatever for whatever the tenant needed, and we verify through paperwork, it's not a deficiency. However, if we're just doing an inspection and the resident just removed the door for whatever reason and it's not a reasonable accommodation request, then we would cite it as a missing door.
Okay, perfect. So to confirm, privacy is a concern for interior doors between rooms, just as it is for entry doors on the unit's exterior. Is that correct?
Absolutely, 100%.
Can you go over which doors must be spring closing and when it's not necessary?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't require spring-loaded hinges. That's going to be up to your local code. There's certain developments that are constructed in a manner that require those types of hinges. So it's really up to your local, probably your fire code, that will determine whether you have spring self-closing hinges, the spring-loaded hinges. I think if you have a closed corridor development, then they would require those spring, but we don't require them. TDHCA NSPIRE does not require those types of hinges. If we see them, they have to operate as intended, and we'll sign them if they don't work, but we don't require that. That's up to local code. I think it's a fire code. I think it's up to your fire marshal to determine whether those self-closing hinges are required or not. Usually, what I mean is like a closed corridor, like a hotel style, where you have closed corridors. A lot of the hotels you'll see, we have some developments that are constructed in that manner, where they're closed corridors. Usually those will have those spring loaded, but it's not a requirement under NSPIRE and not a requirement under TDHCA. But if they're there, they have to operate as intended.
Thank you. How often is an NSPIRE inspection conducted on a particular community?
Another great question. So it depends. Remember when we talked about earlier. So normally we're required to come out at least once every 3 years to conduct an inspection. But when we talked about the score, remember, if your development score is below 70, then we're going to come out at least once every year until the score improves. So if your development scores 65 and 20, if I conduct an inspection tomorrow on your development and you score 65, we're going to come out probably within the next year. We'll come out probably next January or February. If you score another 65, we'll come out another year again. But if you score 65, tomorrow I conduct an inspection, you score 65, we come back out. Next year you score 90, then you'll go back on a 3-year inspection schedule, really based on your score. So you really want to get a higher score, above 70. The higher the better.
Okay, next question. We've got about 9 more minutes. We're going to do questions, and then we'll shift gears and we can answer the rest of the questions through the chat or through the questions box, or if we have time in office hours. So don't give up on us yet. We're just running out of time. This person says they have 2 doors that have the long level push bar that opens it. Is it okay to have a deadbolt on those doors?
the door, I have a lot of questions about that. I mean, where the door is located? It's a common area. Um, is it a storage room?
That might be one they need to
Yeah,
you on to
you'll
talk.
probably need on that one. Yeah, send me a picture. Give me as much information as possible. Deadbolts are really not really shouldn't be anywhere unless it's in a closet where you have like some like a maintenance closet where you have like flammable materials in there and you want to lock it from the exterior. So yeah, you definitely would have to send me a picture and provide me a little bit more information before I can answer that question. So sorry about that.
For an accessible pet station, if it's in the grass but cannot be reached by a sidewalk and you have to step over a curb to get to it, does that mean it's not accessible?
Yes, 100%. So your accessible route has to be 36 inches, and you can't have more than a half-inch gap or a half-inch of vertical difference on your accessible route. And you have to have the reach range, so they have to be able to reach it. It has to be within, depending on your accessibility standard at your development, it has to be either between 54 and 48 inches on an accessible route, which is 36 inches, with a cross slope that's no more than 2%. Um, can't have a slope more than 5%, 5 or 8%. If you do, then you have to have handrails. Can't have more than a half-inch gap, and it has to be yeah. There's a lot. So a lot of times, if you're going to put a dog weigh station and you have an accessible route that is 36 inches wide minimum, and there's no cross slope that's more than 2%, and the slope is not more than 5 and 8%, and you put it right on your sidewalk, then it'll be fine. But there's a lot to there's a lot to accessibility in regards to reach ranges, accessible routes, and location.
Thank you. So the next question is, if the unit has a fireplace, do they have to have a carbon monoxide detector?
Yes, that is a fuel burning appliance. You definitely have to have a carbon monoxide.
Are you required to have fire extinguishers in each unit?
Again, this is not something that TDHCA or NSPIRE requires. This is up to local code. It's going to be up to your fire marshal to determine whether you're required to have fire extinguishers or not. However, as I said, if there are there, we're going to inspect them to ensure that they operate as intended. Up
All
to your
right,
local fire marshal.
piggybacking off of the fire marshal doing something different than what we're telling them. This property says that they have smoke detectors in their common areas as required by the local fire chief, but not in the units, also per the fire chief. Is that okay, or are they out of compliance?
Um, so if we come across that scenario, if I'm conducting an inspection, I come across that, we're going to ask for documentation from your fire chief. We're probably going to cite it. We will cite it because NSPIRE requires those to be in certain locations. So the inspector will cite it, but the onus would be on the owner or the property manager to provide us that documentation from the fire chief that states that the fire chief wants it at X, Y, and Z.
Okay, I think you just answered this about the smoke detectors and the corrections with the inspector. They want to know if they can install a battery though, like while the inspector's on site, which I think is going to shift with the new requirements anyway.
Yeah, new requirements. They have to be hardwired or they have to be 10-year battery tamper proof. So, and that took effect December 29th of 2024. So if you install a battery, we're still going to cite it. So you have to have the 10-year tamper proof. That means you're not going to be able to take a battery out or install it. Those batteries are embedded in those smoke detectors. So the smoke detector, the new standard requires a smoke detector to be either hardwired or to have a 10-year tamper-proof battery. That means tamper-proof means you can't access that battery.
Perfect, thank you. If the laundry room has gas, do we still have to have a carbon monoxide detector?
Yes, if there's gas anywhere in that unit, there needs to be a carbon monoxide detector on that wall in the room where the gas is at, or on the exterior wall of the other side where that's at. So yeah, if you have any gas in your units anywhere, or if you have an attached garage, then you have to have a carbon monoxide detector somewhere in that vicinity.
So the next question is, will TDHCA have another training that goes into more detail about NSPIRE? And we will. We do those twice a year with the Texas Apartment Association. There will be an announcement that goes out about that. TAA has not scheduled those yet, so stay tuned.
Thank you, Kara. Yeah, we do. We do have a full presentation. It's a day long, 8 hour, where we get into every single one of these standards. We have under each 63 standards, there's, like I said, there's probably 3 to 17 deficiencies depending on the standard, and we talk about every single type of deficiency. We get into the meat and the potatoes of NSPIRE. I mean, we even talk about the type of corrective action. We have pretty in-depth 8 hour training, probably about 7 hour training on NSPIRE. And like Kara said, just be on the lookout. We do that through TAA. That'll probably be sometime in the spring, I think, coming up in the next few months, probably in March or April of this year. So like Kara said, just kind of be on the lookout for that. And it's through TAA, Texas Apartment Association.
So what standards are garbage disposals under if they're not, if the GFCI does not address the garbage disposals, what this question is?
I don't think garbage disposals are an inspectable item under NSPIRE anymore. I need to double check that, but I don't think there are an inspectable item under NSPIRE. I'll have to double check that, but I think that is correct.
Apartments with attached garages, do we have to install carbon monoxide detectors in each room?
That's a great question. There is specific placements on that. I don't know right off the top of my head. I think you either have to have one. Now I'm just kind of trying to reflect back on what I remember. Don't quote me on this. There's specific locations in NSPIRE, but I think you have to have one either in. Yeah, you know what? I don't really know. I can't remember off the top of my head because there are specific locations. It may be, so if you have an attached garage, it may be on the wall of the interior of that. But I'd have to look at the standard for that one. So I apologize. Don't know the specific answer on placement for the carbon monoxide detector on that question. So shoot me an email. I'll get that for you.
Okay, I'm looking through what's left because we're at the 10:40 mark.
Great questions. Appreciate all the questions.
I think a lot of these are kind of repeats of things you've already talked about that people want more information on. So I will provide email addresses, and then as I'm going through them, if there's anything that's not that kind of a thing, I will leave it open and we can discuss it during office hours. So if you are planning to stay with us, then you will have the opportunity to hear more questions. We do an open forum office hours from now until about 11:30. If you are leaving us now, then we thank you for joining us. We thank Manuel for sharing this information with us. You will be prompted to complete a survey whenever you leave, whether that's now or in an hour. I would appreciate you filling that out and sharing that information with us. If you guys will give us just a couple of minutes, we're going to shift gears into the office hours open forum section, and then I will continue going through the chat, and we will continue asking Manuel these questions as we have time through the office hours.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions and participation.